in my life where for some reason I've kind of checked out, and that's when really painful things happen. But then after my parents separated, I'm not sure if it's because of those things that happened where I wasn't present when I maybe should have been for my family, but I started getting really obsessive about making sure that everyone was okay and feeling really anxious when I wasn't, about any member of my family when I wasn't with them. Yeah, so I kind of stopped investing. This was probably like when I was 17 or 18. Near the end of high school and after graduating, I stopped investing in my own life. I kind of disconnected myself from all my friends and stayed at home, kind of always trying to be available for my family. But at the same time, it seemed like after my parents separated, everyone was kind of moving on with their life. My parents seemed healthier than they'd ever been, except that it was really hard initially after they separated, probably for a few years, to visit my dad. Whenever I'd go to his house, I would just cry and cry and cry, and he thought that I didn't want to spend time with him. But it was really hard to be around him, because I just felt so much sadness for everyone in my family, and it was so heavy. But he just thought that I didn't love him. But I love my dad so much. Sorry. Anyway. Yeah, so probably for like 3 or 4 years, I didn't invest in anything that interested me or friends or like a life of my own, whereas everyone in my family was kind of creating a little bubble for themselves. And then I started resenting them because they had their own life and I didn't, but also thinking like, I'm here for you all the time and you guys aren't here for me. But that was my own decision at the same time to not, because of my own anxiety. But it was also very hard. Anyway, so I spent the year after high school. Oh, I also thought I'd share this funny thing, that in grade 12, I started going to a new school, but I didn't really make any friends. And everyone saw me as this kind of like activist person who cared about a lot of issues. I think I did care about a lot of things, but then most of my like grade 12 year I spent on the couch eating Pop-Tarts watching Netflix. Really funny if they could see me. But I didn't talk to anyone, so they didn't know, so I kept up this facade of being like, I don't know, therapist while eating Pop-Tarts. Stupid shows on Netflix, anyway. So I spent a lot of the year after I graduated at home alone, kind of feeling weird. I'm sure this is a familiar feeling for many people, like all of a sudden I can choose what I want to do, but there's all these options and there's a right choice and what do you do? And also feeling like I couldn't leave my family because if I left, everything would fall apart or like people wouldn't be okay. So then I eventually decided that I needed to do something. And I decided to go woofing in California at a hostel. So my parents...
Can you just explain what woofing is? In case?
Oh, sorry. It's Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So you like go volunteer for... Usually it's farms, but this was a hostel. I don't know how they got on the site. Anyway. So it was the first time my parents had been together since they weren't together, but they both drove me to the border because I was getting a flight out of Bangor. Anyway, turns out I couldn't do that because it's illegal. So I got sent home and I had to sign, this always cracks me up, I had to sign it for the signature of alien. So then I felt really discouraged after that. And I had a lot of anxiety about leaving, so I like built this thing up where, okay, I'm gonna go and I'm leaving my family, but then it was this weird thing where I prepared for it, which was kind of like traumatic, and then I had to go back. And then I think it was bad, but it also really made me realize that I did have to get out of there. So then I ended up going to BC to woof on an actual farm, partially because I thought I wanted to test out whether that was something that I wanted to do, but I ended up babysitting the whole time, which wasn't. Anyway, that's a different point altogether. But for the first time, it was not for the first time, but it was kind of not therapeutic. We were trying to think of the right word for this, but I was really nervous, like leaving my family. And I thought, with the time difference, how am I going to make sure my mom gets home from work every night? But when I got there, I was so worried about myself it was kind of like a relief from being so worried about my family all the time. And also I was gone for a month and just realizing that everyone gets on with their life without me and that they can be okay on their own. Like they're all strong people and can work through their shit without me there.
The part of it you said where you were like, their anxiety, you didn't know that they could cope with it, but your own, you're like, oh yeah, I can handle it because it's my own. I know, you kind of know what's going on.
Yeah.
But theirs you didn't.
Yeah, I think this is kind of stupid, but understandable, said kind of growing up, especially after my parents separated, that I could cope with my own anxiety and that doesn't make me anxious, but everyone in my family except my dad struggles a lot with mental stuff. Especially my brothers. My mom did a lot when I was younger, but she's a lot better now. And that was one of the times where I felt like I was absent when she had a serious, whatever you call that, anyway, and I felt like I wasn't there for that. Oh yeah, so I always wanted to like absorb my family's anxiety or pain to take it away from them, but I think I ended up just absorbing it, but not really taking anything away from anyone, so I ended up in more pain, but not really relieving anyone of their pain, which I think I realized when I just started feeling my own anxiety, that it's totally, you can deal with it yourself. It's hard, but it's better not to worry about other people's anxiety. I'd like to be there for them, but to not, anyway.
Just to clarify, where did you grow up?
Oh, Fredericton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went a far way.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Good. Okay.
So that time, do you want to talk a little more about that time? You said it wasn't, you were babysitting.
Okay, well, I only actually, this feels kind of pathetic, but I only actually stayed on the farm for a week. I think I just got really lonely because I was the only person woofing there, and the whole reason why I went to go woofing partially was to explore the idea of organic farming, but also because I was super lonely in Fredericton, partially because I isolated myself, but I was looking for community, but didn't find it woofing. I was with a family, and they were going through a hard time, and it was just kind of weird. And I was in this super hippie, weird part of BC that freaked me out a little bit. Anyway, so I left after a week and I went to Vancouver and I spent Easter with my dad's cousin. And then I went to Victoria and spent probably 3 weeks there. And while I was there, my mom sent me an excerpt of a book that Peter wrote, and it was about community. And I read it, and then that night I went to the hostel I was staying in and I applied right away. And I never wanted to go to university at all. I almost dropped out of high school because I thought everything was a scam. I think I was a bit of a romantic. I wanted to go live on a mountain or something. I tried to convince my mom to go homeschool me some in the Appalachian Trail. Okay, this is what I want to do. Because of the community, I wasn't interested in like the academic part at all. Anyway, so I think that made me feel okay to come back home because I had a plan. So a few weeks later, or maybe a week later, I came home. Ironically, just when I found a community in Victoria that was kind of cool and nice to hang out with, then I just left. Anyway. So I came back and worked for the summer and ended up here.
Cool. So, you came here for the community. What surprised you while you were here?
I think it surprised me that, in my first year I was kind of super gung-ho about living in a house with all these people, and it was super fun and I had a great time. I think maybe I started getting frustrated in classes and stuff about realizing that I cared about the academics, but I didn't feel like I had a voice or something. don't think we talked about that, and I don't know where I'm going with it.
Was it?
I guess we did later. Anyway. Well, I think it surprised me that before I came here, I think I was pretty extreme about my picture of community or what it should be like. I think mostly because I was just so lonely that I was like, oh, community, you need to do everything together, and it's like no segregation in your life. You can't work here and socialize here. But I think I've definitely mellowed out of it. Because I don't feel so lonely anymore, and I feel like I have that connection, and I'm welcome and loved here, and that's enough to like fuel the other parts of my life.
I can move on.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
Well, I feel like it's kind of tied with, I guess, where I'm going. You met someone here.
Yes.
You met a lot of people here.
Yes, a lot of great people.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Ian and your relationship.
Oh, can I say one thing before that I
Yes.
remembered that I wanted to say on
Mhm.
anything? Okay. That because it leads into that anyway. I came here because I was kind of desperate for community, and that part was really good. But I also found that I definitely had a passion for specific academic stuff, specifically women's issues. So that I think has become like given me energy to stay, but also the community anyway. But I also struggled, especially in my first 2 years, to find my voice, feeling like I'm so affected by people and emotions that how do I have the kind of knowledge that is appropriate for academia or whatever. So I think part of my journey is discovering that what I believe is that is a super valid kind of knowledge that comes from personal and emotional experience and those kind of like airwaves or whatever. So then in my third year, I guess, and that was kind of something that I was working through kind of by myself and like getting up this strength to like find my own voice, but then to feel comfortable that I actually have something to say and that I communicate it with other people. And then, so last year, I think, last fall, 2015, it was like a combination of things that started giving me a lot of confidence. I started hanging out with Ian, and he was one of the first people that I like really felt listened to by and found that I had something valuable to say and respected the questions that I was asking and like really helpful building my like intellectual confidence and like coming from my own place, like speaking from my own voice that I felt comfortable and honest speaking from. But also at the same time I was taking literary theory with Joel and Lindsay and postmodernism, which both also kind of helped develop that and kind of affirming me in the way that I think and the way that I communicate and write. Kind of gave me the confidence to think that I actually do have intelligence and there are like a lot of things that I care about and that I can like look into those things from my own perspective or whatever.
Oh, well, also you mentioned kind of your relationship with Ian and your anxiety and how.
Yeah.
Or if you want to talk about
Yeah,
that.
sure. I guess I don't always struggle with anxiety, but it like comes in really intense packets. So I think I've had a lot of those in the past year, and when that happens, if I sometimes it's very uncomfortable to communicate it because it makes me feel more alienated and like I want to isolate myself because if someone doesn't understand, I feel like I'm crazy, and that's like really just more anxiety-inducing. And Ian always listens to me and never makes me feel crazy. And that is like really therapeutic. And yeah. And he always says like, whatever you're afraid of or whatever, that's not real, but it's coming from a real place. Like there's something making you feel this way. It's not that you're psychotic or whatever, and that's super helpful for me. And it makes me feel like I can trust people and I can talk about it without feeling alienated or crazy, or like I have to isolate myself when I'm feeling anxious, because that also makes it worse. It's like a weird, I'm sure people can understand that, but yeah.
So shifting slightly, not very much, what are some ways that you've been able to use your voice?
I think now that in my own being, I've discovered that I respect myself and how I think and what I care about, and that especially now that understanding that has made me a lot less angry, and I hate speaking from like a place of anger. And I think I did that a lot maybe in my second year, and that made me really uncomfortable, and I think it made other people uncomfortable, but I think that was also a necessary thing to happen for me. But after that, now that I feel, not that I don't still struggle with that, but I just feel so comfortable most of the time in myself, in this environment anyway, to speak from my emotions, and I'm not afraid to cry when I'm talking, or I don't think that disproves my point, or that I have to like possess any kind of knowledge or factual information or anything to have something valuable to say. That I feel much more comfortable speaking from that space. So especially in regards to how I feel as a woman, I feel like I can talk about that now, because I found the voice that feels honest to me to speak from in that place, which I didn't feel honest before necessarily. So that was really helpful. Yeah. So especially because that's a thing that I like care so much about, that's what is important to me to be able to use my voice for. And I feel like I can do that now here. So.
And now you are engaged in writing your thesis.
Yeah.
And otherwise.
And I have to say that, like, Katie and Hannah, who are supervising my thesis, have been so amazing for like listening to me in like whatever kinds of like crazy thoughts I have, or whatever crazy places they come from. They're like so affirming, and so that's really helpful. I think a lot of what I do comes from a very emotional place, and I haven't felt safe with that before, and they make me feel very safe. So, and that's a lot of what my thesis is about, I guess, and other things. But so that's been, writing that is like really affirming for myself to write it, and for it to feel like there's actually something like bigger going on inside of it. It's like I'm a part of something bigger, not just my own emotions.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Is there anything else that you can think of?
I'm starting to feel like I'm talking in circles.
No? Okay. Should we open up? Anyone have questions?
I just have a memory. When Alex came down the stairs, I remember now, she was in lit theory for one class. And you ended up just not staying, like not interesting you as much, but you were there for that one class. And because Alex was in our class for that week, it meant that we didn't have like an even number of people in the class. And we were doing reading duos, so we had to have a partner to read and reflect on these texts that we were assigned. And so Ian volunteered because he'd taken literary theory before, so he volunteered to read one of the texts along with someone who didn't have a reading partner. And so they went on reading literary theory.
And it was funny because we drew straws, and I was the odd man out, so I got paired with Ian. And this was before I was interested in him, but he was interested in me. Roland Barthes' pleasure of the text is what sparked our romance. But then Alex dropped out, so I was no longer paired with Ian, so I had to be paired with Neela.
That's amazing.
But that was,
And she didn't fall in love with me.
in a sense I did.
Hey, I have a question. Okay, so I don't know much about your thesis, but I've heard a little bit about it. I talked to you once for a few minutes, and I talked to Hannah, and I've seen your reading list, and I think that you are working on intuitive knowledge or validating different ways of knowing, perhaps feminine ways of knowing, but in doing this, I mean, you have one of the most sophisticated reading lists of any student I've ever seen. So what I'm thinking is, how do you? It seems paradoxical to me because you are talking about intuitive knowledge, but you're actually doing a very sophisticated academic work. How do you put together these things?
I think that I respect sophisticated academic writers, but
Okay.
I think it's nothing without real world emotional or intuitive side to it.
Okay.
But I really do respect that kind of work.
Okay.
For me, it can't be everything.
So, but your own work, it seems like you're using that vehicle to try to say something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, I really like the combination of theory and creativity, especially emotion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Ian, you're doing some creative writing as a part of your thesis?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is creative writing. Oh my gosh. It's so hard to structure. Yeah. It makes so much sense to me, but I don't know if it'll make sense to anyone else.
That's all part of the process.
Yeah.
Feeling that way.
I'm sure.
Anybody else?
Maybe I should say this for your thesis reading, but can you say anything to others about, what's the value of paying more attention to their emotions in their work?
Well, I guess for me, where I'm trying to go with it in my thesis is that there are these other kinds of knowing that don't isolate us from other people or give us the right to possess things or have power over other people, and having the emotional side of that and to me makes it more connected and more humbling and more situated, which kind of make it unkind to I guess it is a shifting of values away from dominance and towards vulnerability and connectivity and empathy, instead of this cold knowledge that feels very impersonal and to me, and I don't know how to apply it, whereas emotions feel way more applied to me. Maybe to other people, I don't know. But personally, that's what I need to do.
Thank you very much, Mercy, for being willing to do this.